camps on the line, Upper Shankura, I think it was. He survived, and I don't know what happened to him. There was also another very interesting Padre, Padre Paddy Dolan, Roman Catholic Padre, and he used to chide the members of his flock for not attending Mass. Well, after you get up before dawn, and you go out and you work 12 to 14 hours, and you get back to camp in the dark, and you have a bit of a wash and whatever food was available, the last thing on your mind was to go to Mass. There was another Padre named Padre John Marsden, and he went back to Japan after the war as a missionary, and he came back to Australia sometime later and pleaded with all ex-prisoners of war who happened to have souvenired Japanese samurai swords to hand them back, because samurai swords are highly regarded by Japanese families because they're part of the history. And some of those samurai swords were carried by Japanese officers who were hundreds of years old. I know he got a few, but I don't think he got too many.
Now you mentioned Dolan, Padre Dolan, but what about Padre Paddy Walsh? Did you have anything contact with him?
Yes, vaguely. I think he was attached to one of the either Concordia or Tanbaya, I can't remember now. But
did you feel that the chaplains helped to keep the spirit up, well, if that's the right word?
I have to say that some of them did what was expected of them, and some of them fell a little bit short of what was expected. I don't want to mention any names, but I know one particular Padre was not very highly regarded at all by the people with whom he was serving. But the bulk of them did, and particularly people like Noel Duckworth. I mean, he was just magnificent.
Yes, I had that impression myself. Now, when Tanbaya Hospital Camp closed, did you go down with the first group, or were you with the last group?
I'm not sure which group it was, but we were lucky. We got on the train, well, it was a bit crowded, but we went straight from Tanbaya back to Kanchanaburi. Some of them went across, not from Tanbaya, but from the line went across to Bangkok and finished up going into Japan, and of course some of them were unfortunate enough to get torpedoed. But we went back to Kanchanaburi. We were only there a short time before we went back down to Changi, and then we were working on what is now Changi Airport.
Yes, yeah. Did you souvenir any bits of aluminium? Or
yeah, well,
anything like that?
I had some. I had a little aluminium case made by somebody. It was hinged, and it was embossed, and it was embossed with the colour patch of my unit, and I also had a cloth strip and an aluminium strip with Japanese characters on them, which I brought home. And my wife, and the most important thing I brought back was a Union Jack. And when we were marching up through Thailand, this got tangled around my feet in the middle of the night, and I didn't know what it was. I picked it up, and it was all covered in mud, and I knew it was cloth, and cloth was as scarce as hen's teeth. So the next morning I was going to take it down the river and wash it, and it was a Union Jack, and it had some names and numbers on it, obviously from one of the British regiments. I think it was the Manchester Regiment. So I had an indelible pencil, and I had the names of every member of my unit in that pond party put on it, and when we got back to Changi, I also got all the other members of my unit put on it, and I had that hanging on my recreation room up here when we were living in Benoa in Queensland, and my wife always wanted me to send it to the War Museum, and I said that, love, they've got that much stuff in the basement of the War Museum, some of it will never see the light of day. But then they established a museum in the Signals training depot at Watsonia in Melbourne, and I sent it all down there. But before I did, I wanted to find out what these symbols were on this piece of aluminium I had. So I went to a Japanese duty-free store in Surfers Paradise, and they couldn't recognise it. And they said, oh, they think it's Korean. So I went to a Korean restaurant, and they said, no, it's Chinese. So I went to a Chinese restaurant, and the young chap said, oh, I said, that's pretty old script. He said, just a minute. And he went out into the kitchen, and he brought back this dear old Chinese lady about that high. And she had a look at it, and she said, yes, it's got something to do with death and funerals. And then I realised what it was, because when somebody died, the burial party had to take it out of the camp to the burial site, and you used to get these little things to authorise that you were part of a burial party. Yes, that stuff was all in the Sig Museum there in Watsonia.
Yes, I've been there.
And I also brought a sword home with me.
Mm.
It wasn't a samurai sword, but I had a piece of shrapnel taken out of the back of my neck in Alexandria Hospital, which the doctor tied on my finger. So when I came home, I had the sword, and I had a Japanese helmet, and I had them all chromium plated, and I hung the swords up, cross swords up with a Japanese helmet in between it. The Japanese helmet finished up as a basket, flower basket, when we came up to Queensland, and I gave the sword to my grandson in America, who is a member of the United States Marine Corps, and on the piece of shrapnel I had on one side engraved, "From Tojo with love," and on the other side, people remember the controversy about scrap iron being sent to Japan before the war, and I put courtesy of BHP.
Now, you've gone back to, you've probably gone back to Kanchanaburi.
Yep.
And then how did you move from there to back to Singapore?
Went back by training,
by
trucks.
Back by train. Yeah. And what sort of a reception did you get when you arrived
in Changi?
Yes.
Well, the reception was in reverse. I can't remember what sort of a reception we got, but I can remember saying, you know, we're back home.
Yes.
We're back in a holiday camp.
Yes.
Because by the time we got back to Changi, they had duck farms and fowls and vegetable gardens, and, you know, I mean, it wasn't lordly living, but compared to what we had up on the line, it was absolute heaven.
Yes. Now I can appreciate that.
Yeah.
And did you, as you said, you worked out on the airfield. Any other work that the Japs put you to?
we worked in various parts around Singapore. One of the biggest things that they found was there was a depot at one of the rail yards, and a couple of our people found these reels of cotton, thousands of reels of cotton, and it proved to be a bonanza as far as trading was concerned. They became Changi millionaires, and the only thing my friend and I got onto was some calico that they'd been used to cover stuff up. So we wrapped around this our waist, and we took it out in the working party, and we were selling it, and we got a Japanese officer went past in a motorbike and sidecar, and he sent somebody to grab us and took us into an interrogation room, and I thought, you know, we're for the big high jump here, but all we got was a couple of slaps in the face, and we were allowed to go. But trading was the very lifeblood of one place we worked on the docks, and it was filled up with loose cement all over the floor. Our job was to shovel up this loose cement and put it into fresh bags, and over in the corner of the go down were these wooden boxes, and when we knocked them open, they had all sorts of cotton underwear, singlets and underpants, which we put on strings around our back, around our waist, and the next time we went into a party where we were close to any Chinese, you have to do this long distance trading. You'd show what you had to sell, and they'd hold up so many fingers for dollars, and we'd shake our head and you'd agree on a price, and then we had it wasn't actually a shared toilet, but we had one half and they had the other, and you'd go in there and exchange the money of the cloth.
Yeah. So do you remember the day when you found out that the war was over?
Yes. As you know, there were quite a few wireless sets carried around, even up on the railway line, and one of them was made by some of the technicians from our unit, and it was in the head of a coconut fibre broom, and they never write anything down. The chap had operated on his own, and he would pass the information on to one officer, and that officer would walk around and give the news. It was called the Canary Sings. And we heard about the landings in Europe and a few other places, and there was some vague mention of a bomb,